The smell hit Marcus' chin first. Death and decay mixed with something else, something that reminded him of burnt copper and ozone. He adjusted his environmental suit's air filters and kept walking across the barren wasteland of Kepler-442b. 3 months ago. This planet had been a thriving Zephyrian colony world. Now it looked like a graveyard. The evacuation had been swift and total when the Galactic Council declared the world compromised. Marcus never got the full story about what made them abandon everything so quickly. As a salvage operator, he didn't need the full story. He just needed valuable materials left behind. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy for their cold efficiency. They were tall, gray-skinned beings who calculated every decision based on cost and benefit. Emotions were considered a weakness in their society. They had built one of the most successful civilizations in known space by never letting feelings cloud their judgment. Marcus climbed over a fallen piece of architecture that looked like twisted metal and glass. His scanner beeped softly, indicating valuable materials nearby. But the smell was getting stronger, and it wasn't coming from scrap metal. He topped a small hill and stopped dead in his tracks. In the valley below lay something that shouldn't exist, something that made his breath catch in his throat despite 20 years of salvage work across the galaxy. It was a dragon. Not the mythical creatures from Earth's old stories, but close enough that the name fit. The creature was massive, easily 60 feet from nose to tail. Its scales were deep purple that shifted to black at the edges, and even lying motionless, it radiated power. 4 legs ended in claws that could tear through starship hulls. Wings that could blot out the sun were folded against its sides. Marcus had heard rumors about these creatures. The Zephyrians called them Apex Guardians, bioengineered weapons that bonded with a single handler. They were supposedly the most dangerous living things in the galaxy, capable of taking down entire battle fleets, and this one was dying. Marcus could see the wounds even from a distance. Deep gashes along its flanks leaked a glowing fluid that he assumed was blood. One wing was torn and bent at an unnatural angle. The great head lay on the ground, eyes closed. His first instinct was to back away slowly. Even dying, an Apex Guardian could probably kill him without effort. But something made him pause. The creature's breathing was labored and weak. Each breath seemed like it might be its last. They had left it here to die alone. The Zephyrians had abandoned their most powerful weapon like broken equipment. Marcus felt a familiar anger rise in his chest, the same anger that had driven him to leave Earth's military years ago. Too many officers who treated soldiers like disposable tools. He climbed down into the valley, his scanner forgotten. Up close, the dragon was even more impressive. And the wounds were even worse. Marcus counted at least 15 major injuries, all of them infected. The creature's scales had lost their luster, and its breathing was shallow and rapid. As he approached, one massive eye opened and focused on him. Marcus froze. The eye was golden with flecks of silver, intelligent and aware. There was no aggression in that gaze, just exhaustion and pain. And something else that made his chest tight: acceptance. The dragon had accepted that it was going to die alone. "Hey there, big guy," Marcus said softly, the way he used to talk to injured soldiers. "That looks pretty rough." The eye tracked his movement as he walked around to get a better look at the wounds. The dragon's head was the size of a small shuttle, but it didn't try to bite him. It just watched. Marcus pulled out his medical scanner, standard equipment for salvage work in case of accidents. The readings made him wince. Massive blood loss, multiple organ damage, severe dehydration, and what looked like some kind of toxic poisoning. "How are you still alive?" he muttered. The dragon made a sound deep in its throat. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine. It sounded almost like it was trying to answer him. Marcus looked into those golden eyes again. In 20 years of salvage work, he had seen a lot of abandoned equipment. Broken ships, damaged machinery, obsolete weapons. But he had never seen anything abandoned that was still alive. His unit crackled to life. "Marcus, this is base station. What's your status?" He keyed the transmitter. "Found something interesting, Sarah. Going to be here longer than expected." "Copy that. Remember, you've got 3 days before the next transport arrives." 3 days. Marcus looked at the dragon again. 3 days to either save this creature or watch it die. The smart thing would be to walk away. This wasn't his problem. Zephyrians had made their choice, and they were the galaxy's experts on cost-benefit analysis. If they had abandoned this creature, there must be a good reason. But Marcus had never been particularly smart about things. Like this, he pulled his emergency medical kit from his pack. It was designed for humans, not 60-foot bioengineered dragons, but the basic principles should be the same. Stop the bleeding, clean the wounds, prevent infection. "All right, big guy," he said, approaching the worst of the wounds. "This is probably going to hurt, but we need to clean these out." The dragon's eye followed him, but it didn't move as he began working. The wounds were worse up close, deep, and ragged, as if something had torn through the creature's hide with incredible force. The glowing blood had a consistency like thick honey and smelled metallic. Marcus worked steadily, cleaning and bandaging what he could reach. The dragon remained perfectly still, even when he had to dig debris out of the deeper cuts. The only sign it felt anything was an occasional soft rumble deep in its chest. After 2 hours, Marcus had to take a break. His suit's cooling system was working overtime, and his water reserves were running low. He sat down near the dragon's head and pulled out a nutrition pack. The golden eye was still watching him. "You're wondering why I'm doing this, aren't you?" Marcus said, more to fill the silence than because he expected an answer. "Honestly, I'm wondering the same thing." He took a bite of the tasteless protein bar and continued talking. Injured soldiers had always responded better when someone talked to them. "My name's Marcus. Marcus Chun. I'm from Earth. You probably never heard of it. Small planet, not much to look at. We're not part of the Galactic Council yet. Too primitive, they say." The dragon blinked slowly. "I used to be a medic in Earth's military. Saw a lot of soldiers get left behind by officers who thought they were disposable. Always hated that." Marcus finished the protein bar and stood up. "Nobody should die alone if there's something that can be done about it." The dragon made that soft rumbling sound again. This time it almost sounded like agreement. Marcus spent the rest of the day working on the wounds. As the planet's sun began to set, he realized he had a problem. His equipment wasn't meant for extended field operations, and he was running low on medical supplies. More importantly, the dragon needed fluids and nutrients that he couldn't provide with human medical supplies. He activated his comm unit and called his ship's AI. "Aria, I need you to scan the abandoned Zephyrian facilities for medical supplies. Specifically, anything designed for large-scale biological maintenance." "Acknowledged, Marcus. Beginning scan now." The AI paused for a moment. "I detect several medical facilities within 10 kilometers. However, I should point out that removing materials from an abandoned colony may violate salvage regulations." "Log it as a medical emergency," Marcus replied. "I'll pay the fines later." The dragon's breathing had improved slightly during the day, but it was still critical. Marcus set up his portable shelter near the creature's head and prepared to spend the night. As darkness fell, he became aware that the dragon was watching him again. "Can't sleep with her?" Marcus asked. "Yeah, me neither. Those wounds are going to get infected if we don't get some proper antibiotics into you." The dragon shifted slightly, bringing its head closer to Marcus's shelter. The movement was obviously painful, but deliberate. "Easy there, big guy. Don't strain yourself." But the dragon continued to move until its head was only a few feet away from Marcus. Up close, he could see that the scales weren't just purple and black. They had an iridescent quality that made them shimmer in the light. From his camp setup, the golden eyes studied him with unmistakable intelligence. This wasn't just an animal or even a sophisticated weapon. This was a thinking, feeling being that someone had left to die. "They really did just abandon you, didn't they?" Marcus said quietly. "When the evacuation order came, they left you behind like broken equipment." The dragon's expression, if a creature that size could have expressions, seemed. To confirm his words, Marcus reached out slowly and placed his hand on the smooth scales near the dragon's nose. The creature didn't pull away. Its skin was warm and seemed to pulse with some kind of internal energy. "Well, they're not here now," Marcus said. "It's just you and me. and I'm not going anywhere until we figure this out." As if responding to his words, the dragon closed its eyes and let out a long, slow breath that might have been contentment. For the first time since finding the creature, Marcus felt a spark of hope. The dragon's breathing was stronger, and some of the smaller wounds had already begun to heal under the bandages. Whatever these creatures were, they had remarkable regenerative abilities, but they would need more than basic first aid to save this one. Marcus spent the night monitoring the dragon's vital signs and planning his next moves. The abandoned Zephyrian. Marcus found the first medical facility 3 kilometers north of the valley. The building was intact but eerily quiet, like everything else the Zephyrians had left behind. Their evacuation had been thorough. No personal items, no loose equipment, nothing that suggested people had lived and worked here just months ago, but they had left the infrastructure. The medical bay was extensive, designed to handle everything from routine maintenance to emergency surgery for beings of various sizes. Marcus's scanner indicated multiple large-scale biological support systems, exactly what he needed. "Arya, can you interface with their medical database?" "Attempting connection now," his ship's AI responded. "Connection established. Warning. This system requires authorization codes for access to restricted biological maintenance protocols." Marcus sighed. Of course it wouldn't be simple. He spent an hour trying to bypass the security systems before taking a more direct approach. 20 years of salvage work had taught him that most security systems had the same weakness: they were designed to keep people out, not to stop someone from physically removing the components. It took him another hour to extract what he needed: biological fluid synthesizers, antibiotic dispensers, tissue regeneration stimulators, and something called a large-scale trauma stabilization unit. That looked like it was built for creatures much bigger than humanoids. The equipment was heavier than expected, even with his suit's mechanical assistance. By the time he loaded everything onto his portable transport sled, the sun was already high in the sky. Marcus made good time back to the valley, but as he crested the hill, his heart nearly stopped. The dragon was awake and moving, not much, but enough to show that Marcus's initial treatment had helped. The great head was raised, and those golden eyes were tracking his approach. When the dragon saw him, it made a sound that might have been relief. "Miss me?" Marcus called out as he guided the transport sled down the slope. "I brought presents." Setting up the medical equipment took another hour. The Zephyrian systems were sophisticated but user-friendly, designed for battlefield conditions where complex procedures weren't practical. Marcus found himself impressed. Despite his anger at how they had abandoned this creature, the biological fluid synthesizer was the first priority. The dragon was severely dehydrated, and its healing processes needed raw materials to work with. Marcus programmed the unit based on the blood samples he had collected earlier, then carefully inserted the 4-line into a major vessel in the dragon's neck. The creature remained perfectly still during the procedure, though Marcus could tell it was uncomfortable. When the fluids began flowing, the dragon let out a long breath that sounded almost like a sigh of relief. "Better?" Marcus asked, monitoring the readouts. The dragon's vital signs were already improving. Next came the antibiotic treatment. The wounds were severely infected, and some showed signs of tissue necrosis. Marcus loaded the dispensers with broad-spectrum antibiotics and began treating each injury site. As he worked, he talked to keep both of them calm. "You know, I've been wondering about your people, the Zephyrians. They're supposed to be logical about everything. Cost-benefit analysis for every decision. So what made them leave you behind?" The dragon's eyes followed his movements, and Marcus got the strange impression it was listening intently. "I mean, you're obviously valuable, powerful. They don't just grow creatures like you in a lab overnight." Marcus finished treating a particularly nasty wound on the dragon's shoulder. Unless there was something that made you more expensive to save than to abandon." The dragon made a soft rumbling sound, almost like it was agreeing with him. Marcus was starting the tissue regeneration treatment when his cum unit crackled to life. "Unknown human vessel. This is Zephyrian Authority ship calculation. You are operating in restricted space without proper authorization. Marcus keyed his transmitter. This is salvage vessel Lucky Strike, operating under standard salvage rights. The colony was declared abandoned. Negative, Lucky Strike. This system contains classified biological assets. Depart immediately or face detention. Marcus looked at the dragon, who had raised its head at the sound of the transmission. The creature's expression, if dragons could have expressions, seemed almost fearful. I'm sorry, Calculation, but I'm currently engaged in a medical emergency. We'll depart as soon as patient is stabilized. There was a long pause before the Zephyrian voice returned, colder than before. There are no authorized personnel requiring medical assistance in this system. Then I guess this one's unauthorized, Marcus replied, and cut the transmission. The dragon was watching him intently now, and Marcus could swear there was something like gratitude in those golden eyes. His cum unit activated again, but this time it was his ship's AI. Marcus. I'm detecting a Zephyrian military vessel in orbit. Destroyer class. They could vaporize us from orbit if they choose. Marcus looked at the dragon again. They won't. How can you be certain? Because if they were willing to destroy what's down here, they would have done it months ago instead of just abandoning it. The dragon's head moved closer to Marcus, and he reached out to stroke the smooth scales. The creature's breathing had stabilized, and several of the smaller wounds were already showing signs of improvement. They're scared of you, aren't they? Marcus said quietly. That's why they left you here. Not because you weren't valuable, but because you became too valuable. Too powerful. The dragon's eyes seemed to confirm his guess. Marcus spent the rest of the day working with the medical equipment. The tissue regeneration systems were particularly impressive. He could actually watch the dragon's wounds healing in real time. But it was slow work, and some of the damage was extensive. As evening approached, he realized they had made incredible progress. The dragon was breathing normally, most of the infections were under control. And the creature seemed more alert and aware. It was also watching Marcus with an intensity that was both flattering and slightly unnerving. What is it, big guy? Marcus asked as he checked the 4 lines. The dragon shifted its position, bringing its massive head closer to where Marcus was working. Then, very carefully, it extended its neck until its nose was almost touching Marcus's shoulder. Marcus froze. The dragon was close enough to bite him in half without effort, but there was nothing threatening about the gesture. If anything, it felt almost ... affectionate. Hey there, Marcus said softly, reaching up to touch the smooth scales of the dragon's snout. You're feeling better, aren't you? The dragon closed its eyes and made a sound deep in its throat, a rumbling purr that Marcus could feel in his bones. The sound was strangely comforting, like the purr of a cat amplified as OUSANDFOLD. Marcus had treated a lot of injured soldiers over the years, but he had never experienced anything quite like this. The dragon wasn't just accepting his help, it was actively responding to him, forming what could only be described as a bond. The Zephyrians don't understand this, do they? Marcus said, still stroking the dragon's scales. They created you to be a weapon, but you're so much more than that. The dragon opened its eyes and looked directly at him. There was definitely intelligence there, but also something else. Something that the coldly logical Zephyrians would never recognize or appreciate. Emotion. Marcus spent the night monitoring the dragon's progress and thinking about what he had learned. The Zephyrians had created the perfect biological weapon, powerful, intelligent, and capable of forming bonds with handlers. But somewhere along the line, this particular dragon had become too much for them to handle. Maybe it had refused orders. Maybe it had shown too much independence. Or maybe it had simply demonstrated the kind of emotional depth that made the Zephyrians uncomfortable, whatever the reason. They had chosen to abandon it rather than deal with the complications. When morning came, Marcus was awakened by a gentle nudge against his shelter. The dragon had moved during the night, positioning itself so that its head was near Marcus's sleeping area. It was watching him with those golden eyes, waiting patiently for him to wake up. Morning to you too, Marcus said, checking his chronometer. He had slept better than he had in months, despite being camped next to a creature that could destroy a battle fleet, The dragon's wounds had healed, remarkably overnight. The tissue regeneration systems had worked even better than Marcus had hoped. Several of the smaller injuries were completely gone, and even the major wounds were closing rapidly, but the most dramatic change was in the dragon's behavior. The creature was alert and active, raising its head to watch Marcus's every move. When he approached with the medical equipment, the dragon positioned itself to make his job easier. "You're a smart one, aren't you?" Marcus said as he checked the healing progress. "No wonder they were scared of you." The dragon rumbled in response, and Marcus was starting to recognize different tones in the creature's vocalizations. This one sounded almost like amusement. His cum unit activated again. The Zephyrian voice was back, and this time it sounded annoyed. "Human vessel, Lucky Strike. You have had adequate time to complete any legitimate salvage operations. Depart immediately." Marcus looked at the dragon, who was watching him intently. "I'm sorry, but my patient isn't ready to travel yet. Medical ethics require me to ensure full recovery before transport." "Your patient?" The Zephyrian voice was sharp. "Explain." Marcus made a... On the third morning, Marcus woke to find the dragon standing. Not just alert, but actually standing on all four legs for the first time since he had found it. The massive creature towered above him, 60 feet of living weapon that moved with predatory grace despite its recent injuries. For a moment, Marcus felt a chill of fear. This was what the dragon really was, not an injured patient but an apex predator, capable of destroying armies. Then the dragon lowered its great head and gently nudged Marcus's shoulder with the same affectionate gesture it had been using for days. "Well, hello there," Marcus said, his fear evaporating. "Feeling better?" The dragon rumbled in response, a deep purr that vibrated through the ground. Its golden eyes were bright and clear, and the wounds that had been fatal just 3 days ago were now barely visible scars beneath the gleaming scales. Marcus packed up his medical equipment, noting that most of it was no longer needed. The dragon's natural healing abilities had taken over once the infections were cleared and its strength restored. He had simply provided what any good medic would: a chance for the body to heal itself. As he worked, the dragon watched every movement with obvious intelligence. When Marcus struggled to lift a heavy piece of equipment, the dragon carefully used one massive claw to help move it. When Marcus dropped a small tool, the dragon's head shot down with surprising delicacy to pick it up and hand it back to him. "You know," Marcus said, accepting the tool from jaws that could bite through starship armor, "I'm starting to think the Zephyrians were right to be scared of you. Just not for the reasons they think." The dragon tilted its head in a gesture that was unmistakably curious. Marcus's cum unit crackled to life before he could elaborate. "Lucky Strike. This is Commander Vex of the Zephyrian Authority ship calculation. I am coming down to the surface for immediate extraction of military assets." Marcus looked at the dragon, who had gone very still at the sound of the Zephyrian commander's voice. "I'm sorry, Commander, but I don't see any military assets here. Just a rehabilitated patient under my medical care. Do not test my patience, human. That creature is Zephyrian property, and you are guilty of theft of military resources." The dragon moved closer to Marcus, positioning itself protectively between him and the direction they had been receiving transmissions from. The gesture was unmistakable. The dragon was preparing to defend him. "Easy," Marcus said quietly, placing a hand on the dragon's leg. "Let's see what they have to say first." 20 minutes later, a Zephyrian shuttle descended from orbit and landed on the far side of the valley. Marcus watched through his binoculars as 3 figures in environmental suits emerged and began walking toward them. The dragon watched too, and Marcus could feel tension radiating from the massive creature. "You know them, don't you?" Marcus said. "Not just their species. You know these specific individuals." The dragon's rumble was deeper now. With an edge that might have been anger, the Zephyrians approached to within 50 meters before stopping. Even at that distance, Marcus could see their body language change when they got a clear look at the dragon. "Fear. Pure, undiluted fear. Impossible," one of them said, his voice carrying clearly across the valley through their cum systems. "The unit should be dead." The damage was terminal. Unit designation Apex 7, another voice called out, obviously directed at the dragon. Resume standby position for transport. The dragon didn't move. If anything, it positioned itself more protectively in front of Marcus. Unit designation Apex 7, the voice called again, sharper this time. Acknowledge command authority. Resume standby position. The dragon turned its head to look at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. I think your response to that is up to you, Marcus said quietly. The dragon turned back to face the Zephyrians and made a sound that was definitely not acknowledgement. It was closer to a growl of defiance. The lead Zephyrian commander Vex presumably stepped forward. Human, you do not understand what you are interfering with. That creature is a biological weapon designed for one purpose: absolute destruction. It has been programmed for complete obedience to Zephyrian military authority. Programmed? Marcus looked at the dragon, who was still watching the Zephyrians with obvious hostility. Funny, it doesn't act programmed. It acts like it makes its own choices. That is precisely the problem, Vex replied, and for the first time Marcus heard emotion in a Zephyrian voice. Fear, but also something like regret? Explain, Marcus said. Vex looked at his companions, who seemed to be arguing about something in their own language. Finally, he turned back to Marcus. Apex 7 was part of our most advanced Guardian program. Enhanced intelligence, improved combat capabilities, and accelerated bonding protocols for handler integration. Bonding protocols? Each Guardian is designed to form a loyalty bond with a specific handler. This ensures absolute obedience and maximum combat effectiveness. Marcus looked at the dragon again, pieces of the puzzle clicking together in his mind. But something went wrong with this one? Not wrong, Vex said carefully. Unexpected. Apex 7 bonded with its handler as designed. Handler Kex was one of our finest military minds, logical, disciplined, utterly reliable. The dragon made a sound at the mention of that name, and Marcus heard pain in it. What happened to Handler Kex? Marcus asked, though he was starting to suspect the answer. Killed in action during the evacuation of this system. Enemy fire brought down his transport. Vex paused. Apex 7 witnessed the death. Marcus felt his chest tighten. And then what? Then Apex 7 became unstable. It refused orders from other handlers. It became aggressive toward anyone who attempted to establish control. During one incident, it injured 3 technicians who were trying to implement emergency override protocols. You mean it grieved? Marcus said quietly. It lost someone it cared about, and you couldn't understand what that meant. Guardians do not grieve, Vex said firmly. They are weapons. Sophisticated weapons, but weapons nonetheless. Marcus looked at the dragon, who had turned its head to watch him during this conversation. Those golden eyes held depths of emotion that the Zephyrians refused to acknowledge. So you decided it was broken and left it here to die. The unit was declared non-functional and written off as a total loss. Vex confirmed. The cost of rehabilitation was deemed too high for the projected return on investment. Marcus felt anger building in his chest, the same anger he had felt years ago watching military commanders treat soldiers like disposable equipment. Too high? He said, his voice rising. You abandoned a thinking, feeling being because it was expensive to help it through grief? It is not a thinking, feeling being, Vex snapped. It is military hardware with sophisticated behavioral programming. The dragon moved suddenly, rising to its full height and spreading its wings. The wingspan was enormous, easily 100 feet from tip to tip. Even partly healed, the creature was magnificent and terrifying. All 3 Zephyrians stepped backward. If it's just military hardware, Marcus said calmly, why are you afraid of it? Vex didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. Because it has exceeded its design parameters. It has become unpredictable, dangerous. To who? To anyone who attempts to control it without understanding its behavioral modifications. Marcus walked over to the dragon and placed his hand on its leg. The massive creature lowered its head to nuzzle his shoulder, purring with contentment. It doesn't seem dangerous to me. You do not understand, Vex said urgently. You are not trying to control it. The moment you attempt to give it orders, the moment you treat it as a weapon instead of— He paused, struggling with the concept. Instead of a friend? Marcus suggested. That is not possible. Guardians cannot form friendship bonds. They are designed only for handler loyalty. Marcus looked up at the dragon, who was watching the exchange with obvious intelligence. An idea began forming in his mind, something that would either prove his point or get him killed. Epic 7, he said. Using the designation the Zephyrians had used, the dragon's head snapped around to look at him. I need you to do something for me, Marcus continued. Could you please step back about 10 feet and sit down? The Zephyrians tensed, clearly expecting the dragon to refuse or attack. Instead, the massive creature immediately moved backward exactly 10 feet and settled into a sitting position, still watching Marcus attentively. How? Vex breathed. Marcus walked over and patted the dragon's snout affectionately. Because I asked nicely instead of giving orders. Because I've spent 3 days treating his injuries and talking to him like he matters. Because I've never once treated him like a piece of equipment. The dragon rumbled agreement and lowered its head for more attention. The bond, Vex said suddenly. It has formed a new handler bond. No, Marcus corrected. It has formed a friendship. Something your people apparently don't understand. One of the other Zephyrians spoke up for the first time. If you have established control over the unit, then you could transfer ownership to Zephyrian authority. We would be willing to negotiate compensation. Marcus felt the dragon tense beside him. Not interested, Marcus said firmly. He's not property to be bought and sold. Then what do you propose? Vex asked. Marcus looked at the dragon, who was watching him with those intelligent golden eyes. In the past 3 days, they had formed something that went beyond handler, and we